Hi, Dr. Alex here, and welcome to an unusual departure, or perhaps a return to previous older form in the form of videos in Michael Moorcock is Wasted. Now, before I get into the meat of this video, there's a few things I have to get out of the way before I can hit the main topic of this thing. One is that, unfortunately, on occasion, when I make a video about someone I admire who is of an older generation, they have an unfortunate habit of dying shortly after me making the video. So, Michael Moorcock, please don't die because of this video. I do admire and appreciate your work and would rather you stayed around to at least look after and distribute your work to more and more people as long into the future as possible, and don't pop your clogs. And secondly, Michael Moorcock, as far as I'm aware, is not drunk. I don't mean he's wasted as in he's completely pissed out of his skull. At least as far as I know, he's an adult. He can do what he likes. He could well be wasted as far as I know, but I don't know him. I am not monitoring his behavior. I am not spying on him. So I had no idea what his current state of inebriation is, but he is definitely wasted as far as a talent which could be utilized by the broadcasting community. Now, as a very brief summary of Michael Moorcock, for those who don't know him, shame on you. He is one of the most prolific and talented fantasy and, to be fair, other genres. He crosses the boundaries between genres frequently in his writing. The most prolific and talented of authors in the field, who is still alive. Again, it goes to my first statement about please keep being alive. Anyway, one of the most talented authors of the latter part of the 20th century into the 21st, I guess, who is sadly wasted by TV, film, and other streaming broadcast media companies who fawn over authors who are less prolific, less talented, producing unfinished, overweight series centered on playing with toilets, peppered with dodgy sitcom-like catchphrases.
Ooh, it ain't half hot, Mum.
And where the author has stolen much of their ideas and work from other better authors, even down to the form of their pen name. Now, while the crying shames here are multiple, and there are many superior authors who could be utilized by film and TV today, for brevity, let's focus on Michael Moorcock alone, for now. So Michael Moorcock has been writing and publishing works from the early 1960s, from about 1961 to date. And as a consequence, he has so many completed series which could be utilized in their entirety by any TV or film company or streaming company wishing to make a fantasy series or even a standalone film or two or three or four or many, without fear that he's not going to finish a series, for example, because they're already there. Now, while in the mid to late 80s his writing did become a bit more ponderous and wordy and overblown, and his works more difficult to read and less entertaining as a result, in my humble opinion, and his internal editor went on sabbatical and was no longer there to cut the extraneous fluff from his work, that still leaves us with 2.5 decades of outstanding, well-paced fantasy, sci-fi, horror, cross-genre awesomeness which could be turned into series. And while his later works may be overwritten and a bit bloated, at least he did write well-paced stuff early on, and many modern authors never attain that and start off being bloated and overweight with their writing. Brevity, it seems, is a lost art when it comes to modern authors of fiction, and indeed in many other fields. As mentioned, there are many series which could be drawn upon to make either televisual or streaming series of their own, or standalone movies, or series of movies. But where do I start? Well, it's probably sensible to start with the author's most famous work, which would be about Elric of Melniboné. This sword-swinging albino from the island kingdom of Melniboné was a tragic anti-hero figure who, as I may have mentioned, is an albino and rides a dragon, and if that all sounds kind of familiar, yeah, it may be that Michael Moorcock has been ripped off by inferior later authors too, but he's not alone in that. Suffice to say, there are at least 6 books in the series, although he does keep adding books later on, which can be slotted into the timeline of this whole series. But by and large, it has a complete series. If you take the original one that went through to the 80s, for example, you've got about 6 books, and you've got all of them in order, and you get a complete narrative from the tragic beginning to the tragic end, with all the tragic stuff happening in the middle. It's a pretty heavy series, but also still good fantasy fun to be enjoyed by all. Where to go next? You could go to Erakosa, the books in his series, which center around the Eternal Champion, in this case perhaps in his purest form. There are at least 3 books in the main series, which could be turned into TV series, each one of themselves. That's 3 TV series there if you want. Or films. Again, a tragic hero doomed to traipse throughout the multiverse, righting wrongs, or at least trying to put things in some sort of order. Then there's Hawkmoon, which is the boundary between fantasy and sci-fi. It's a very fantasy land, but it's also set in a dystopian future with some future Gran Breton, which is basically Great Britain, a new British Empire, spreading a nightmarish vision of their perfection across the world, all the time inspired by chaos gods and with many multiverse godlike creatures playing with humans as pawns throughout the entire thing. It's just awesome. And again, that Hawkmoon series is in fact 2 series of books. The first being The History of the Runestaff, where our unfortunate hero Hawkmoon is captured by the Gran Breton Empire and is forced to initially work for them, but then manages to break free, but has a jewel shoved in his skull. I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's an awesome series. And then there was a follow-up series, which again could be turned into another series or series of series by any media you like. The second series being the Count Brass series, which basically follows from the unfinished business at the end of the Runestaff series of books. We also have the Quorum series, which again is actually 2 series of books. You've got the Knight of Swords, Queen of Swords, King of Swords series, the Of Swords series of books, which is the first series of Quorum. And then you've got the second series, which takes place some time after the first, which is a whole new series of the unfortunate Quorum, the last of his race, or at least so it appears initially, fighting against crazy humans trying to kill everyone, or at least all of his race anyway. So, yeah, there's so much you could work with. And this is just scratching the surface. There must be at least 100 books by Moorcock, I think, by now. If you like old Edgar Rice Burroughs style stories, you've got Cain of Mars, the Martian trilogy, which, again, would be a fun thing to do as a sort of sci-fi, fantasy, steampunky crossover. In other stranger works, you've got the Jerry Cornelius sort of spy novels, which... Again, there are several of them. You could definitely turn each of those into a series if you wanted to. Returning more into the straight fantasy zone, there's the Von Beck series of books, which includes the brilliant City in the Autumn Stars, which starts off like a period drama set during the French Revolution and then ends up in a very much Elseworld type revolution-adjacent battle between all sorts of weird creatures and a final great alignment of the stars. I don't want to spoil it too much, but again, amazing stuff that could be easily turned into a film or a series, but unfortunately is wasted, as Michael Moorcock is wasted by the modern media. And for those who think that Michael Moorcock might not be adaptable to the screen, which I believe this has been said about him in the past, but come on, the technology's progressed a lot since the 60s, 70s. You could easily turn his stuff into fantastic visual and televisual creations now. And I suspect you probably could have done in the past as well. But we already have evidence of Moorcock's credentials as a screenwriter. Not that you need to hire the author to be your screenwriter, but he could even contribute in that way. He co-wrote the screenplay for The Land That Time Forgot, which, say what you will about the Doug McClure sci-fi films, that one is universally regarded as the best of them. Although I have a soft spot for all of them, and I think they all have something to offer. I think Doug McClure is much maligned and should be given more credit than he is. But that, I would probably go with the mainstream here and say that probably is the best of his films. And the screenplay was co-written by Michael Moorcock. So, you know, he's got credentials there too. So why won't they use him? Now, I know he's roughly contemporary with Alan Moore, and... Alan Moore has a bit of a rep of being someone that you don't want to work with if you're making a film. And he's slightly older than Alan Moore, but they are roughly contemporary. But I don't think Moorcock shares Alan Moore's same prickly attitude towards filmmakers. I think he would happily probably allow his many, many works to be turned into series and films if anyone were to ask him. Now, him being alive means they would have to pay him, I suppose. That's how it usually works. But since they're happy to pay other authors for incomplete series and are left with egg on their faces as a consequence, why not take advantage of this guy with many, many completed fantastic works? Anyway, I'd like to say I'm not being paid by Michael Moorcock or his publishers, I have no association at all with Michael Moorcock. I only wish I did. I wish, as some people know, I have been making some authors who are out of copyright, H.G. Wells, H.P. Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard, some of their books into audiobooks and series on YouTube. And I would love the opportunity to do that with Michael Moorcock's work, but I can't because he is still in copyright, and I will not tread into his works and steal them and nick them when it's still in copyright and it's his work. Well, if I had that chance, I'd love to. I would love to turn Elric into an audiobook series for YouTube. That would be amazing. But I don't expect I'm going to be allowed to do that anytime soon. And indeed, his work is unlikely to enter the copyright-free zone for at least another 70 or 80 years. But on the plus side, at least in 70 or 80 years, I'm fairly confident that people will still be reading his work and still care about it enough to eventually turn it into TV series, films, whatever they're doing in 75, 80 years' time, direct brain broadcasts, who knows? But that is unfortunately going to be something for the future, it seems, because no one right now wants to take advantage of his fantastic talent and his enormous back catalogue of amazing work. Anyway, I think I've covered all I want to say about how Michael Moorcock is wasted, and while there is so much more that could be said about Michael Moorcock, I don't want to ramble on forever about this, and so I think I'll terminate the video here, more or less, and just say to all my watchers, subscribers and viewers, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me in whatever the next video is, and until then, to all my watchers, subscribers and viewers, take care.
Masters, mistresses, the Doctor requires materials in order to maintain the TARDIS and ensure continued functionality. He similarly requires carbon-based comestibles to sustain his own biological functions and existence. Master would never say this, but he requires aid beyond that supplied by this unit in order to acquire these. To aid the Doctor in his various tasks and creations, this can be most effectively achieved via Patreon or Substack subscriptions, or through donations directly to PayPal. Or if you desire physical goods in return for your contributions, written accounts of my travels with the Doctor are also available on Amazon. Links are in the description below. Thank you, masters, mistresses.